Have you ever caught yourself brushing off glaring warning signs right at the start of a relationship, only to deeply regret it months or even years down the road? Men tell themselves she's simply having a rough day. They convince themselves she'll eventually change. They look past behaviors that make them uneasy because they're terrified of losing someone they're drawn to. Then, once everything falls apart, they realize the problems never appeared suddenly. The signs were there from day one. Here's the reality. Selecting the right partner ranks among the most consequential decisions a man will ever make. The wrong relationship can drain your peace of mind, your confidence, your finances, and even your sense of purpose. That's why learning to spot red flags before committing seriously isn't about it. It's about being wise. In today's video, I'm walking through 8 relationship red flags every man needs to watch for before making a serious commitment to a woman. This isn't about bashing women or claiming every woman displaying one of these traits will be a bad partner. It's about urging men to slow down, stay observant, and base their decisions on patterns rather than emotion. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Isabella, and this channel dives into female psychology, relationship dynamics, and the lessons that help men build stronger, healthier, more successful relationships. If that's what you're after, subscribe and join our growing community. With that said, let's get into red flag number 1. On the surface, it sounds entirely fair, which is exactly why so many men fail to notice what it can sometimes reveal. This first red flag shows up when a woman expects to be treated like a traditional woman, while refusing to take on any of the responsibilities that historically came paired with that role. This pattern is becoming more and more common, and plenty of men don't catch it until they're already emotionally invested. Now, to be clear, before anyone misreads this, there's nothing wrong with a man planning meaningful dates, being kind, or making a woman feel valued. Those things belong in healthy courtship. The issue starts when the expectations only flow one way. Speaking as a woman, let me break this down. Some women want a man to pursue them relentlessly, cover every expense, steer every conversation, resolve every problem, and continuously prove his worth at each stage of the relationship, all while insisting they owe nothing back because they see themselves as simply the prize to be won. Healthy relationships don't function like that. A strong relationship can't be built on one person endlessly giving while the other endlessly receives. It demands mutual effort, appreciation, and a genuine willingness from both sides to invest in each other. When one person expects every benefit while accepting zero responsibility, resentment eventually replaces respect. That's exactly why every man should stay alert in the early stages of dating. Ask yourself, is she genuinely interested in knowing you, or mainly interested in what you can offer her? Does she appreciate your effort, or does she simply expect it as a given? Is she willing to contribute, emotionally, practically, consistently, or does she think your role is to earn her affection while she merely sits back and judges whether you measure up? A woman demanding endless investment without offering real reciprocity isn't looking for a partnership. She's looking for someone to fulfill her expectations. And if that imbalance exists from the very start, it rarely fades as the relationship matures. The second red flag emerges when a woman starts imposing conditions and rules on the relationship before any real trust has even had a chance to form. Every healthy relationship needs boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with taking things slow before becoming emotionally or physically involved. The concern isn't that she holds standards. The concern is whether those standards are authentic or being weaponized to seize control of the relationship. Speaking as a woman, I can tell you some people use rules purely as a testing mechanism to see how much someone will tolerate. They pile on one condition after another, not because those rules are actually necessary, but to gauge whether the other person keeps chasing their approval no matter what's demanded. This is exactly why men need to stay observant instead of letting attraction blind them. Ask yourself whether the expectations feel reasonable and whether they apply equally to both people. Is she building something rooted in mutual respect, or does it constantly feel like you're the only one proving your worth, while she simply watches and evaluates from a distance? A relationship should never feel like an endless audition where only one person is fighting for acceptance. A woman who genuinely likes you won't pour her energy into manufacturing obstacles. She'll pour it into building trust, communication, and emotional connection instead. Of course she should hold standards, but healthy standards look nothing like unnecessary games or ongoing power struggles. The strongest relationships aren't built on one person hoarding all the power while the other keeps trying to qualify. They're built when both people willingly invest, communicate honestly, and let trust develop naturally instead of transforming the relationship into a string of tests only one side is ever expected to pass. The third red flag tends to spark disagreement, but it deserves careful thought regardless. It's when a woman already has children from a previous relationship, particularly if she hasn't fully worked through the emotional and practical responsibilities tied to that chapter of her life. Let me be completely clear before continuing. Being a single mother doesn't make someone a bad person, nor does it mean she's incapable of a healthy relationship. Countless single mothers are loving, responsible, and would make wonderful partners. The real question isn't whether she has kids, it's whether you're ready for. She's set into a situation you're genuinely ready for. Speaking as a woman, dating someone with children brings responsibilities that extend far beyond the relationship itself. There may be co-parenting logistics, ongoing communication with an ex, financial commitments, scheduling conflicts, and children whose needs will naturally take priority over yours. None of that is inherently wrong, but pretending it doesn't exist tends to breed frustration down the line. That's why honesty with yourself matters so much. Don't convince yourself love alone will dissolve every complication. Ask whether your lifestyle, goals, and expectations genuinely align with the reality you're walking into. Some men avoid these conversations because they don't want to seem insensitive, but dodging hard discussions doesn't erase the challenges. It only delays them. The healthiest relationships are built on clarity, not assumptions. Before committing seriously, make sure you fully grasp what the relationship will actually demand from both of you. It's far better to spot an incompatibility early than to walk into a situation that leaves you, her, and her children facing needless disappointment later. The fourth red flag surfaces when a woman constantly labels herself as strong and independent, in a way that feels less like genuine confidence and more like a warning shot. To be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a woman being successful, self-sufficient, or fully capable of caring for herself. Those are admirable traits. The issue arises when someone feels compelled to repeatedly announce those qualities rather than simply embodying them. Here's why this matters. Genuinely confident people rarely feel the need to constantly convince others of their confidence. They let their actions do the talking. But when someone repeatedly introduces herself using labels meant to establish dominance or superiority, it can sometimes signal she's preparing you for a difficult dynamic before the relationship has even begun. Pay close attention to how she talks about herself, and even more importantly, how she talks about men. Does she view relationships as partnerships, or does every conversation morph into a competition? Is she interested in teamwork, or does she constantly remind you she doesn't need anyone and can handle everything solo? Healthy relationships aren't built on power struggles. They're built on cooperation, mutual respect, and recognizing that both people bring different strengths to the table. Neither person needs to prove they matter more than the other. That's why you should look past the words themselves and focus on the attitude fueling them. A genuinely secure woman doesn't need to constantly announce her independence. She simply lives it with quiet confidence, all while staying open to building something based on trust, respect, and teamwork instead of a constant tug of war over who holds the upper hand. The fifth red flag appears when a woman insists men and women must approach every single aspect of a relationship in exactly identical ways. At first glance, that might sound fair, but it's worth examining what she actually means when these conversations surface. Speaking as a woman, I believe men and women deserve equal dignity, equal respect, and equal value. But equal value doesn't require identical roles, personalities, or strengths. Every successful relationship finds a balance unique to the two people involved. Problems begin when every disagreement turns into a battle over who holds more authority, who gets the final word, or who refuses to bend. Pay attention to how she frames relationships. Does she talk about building a life together, or does she constantly cast relationships as a battle between men and women? Does she believe every decision needs a winner and a loser, or is she willing to function as part of a team? Healthy relationships thrive on cooperation, not perpetual conflict. There will inevitably be moments when one partner excels in a particular area, whether that's is wick Rinobjit considered doing making Tarsen, Remasli and so, in helps for, or solving practical problems. That's not weakness, that's partnership. If every conversation becomes a debate about proving independence or refusing to lean on one another, the relationship quickly turns exhausting. Love isn't about keeping score or fighting for dominance. It's about recognizing each other's strengths and moving toward a shared future. The strongest couples aren't trying to prove who matters more. They understand that respect, communication, and shared purpose outweigh winning arguments. Before committing seriously, ask yourself whether she views the relationship as a partnership or as an ongoing contest that always demands a victor. The sixth red flag emerges when a woman surrounds herself almost exclusively with friends who are constantly negative about men or who seem to thrive on unhealthy relationship drama. This doesn't mean she can't have single friends or enjoy their company. The real concern is the kind of influence those friendships exert on how she thinks and behaves. Speaking as a woman, the people we spend the most time with shape our attitudes far more than we realize. If her closest friends consistently stir conflict, celebrate breakups, mock healthy relationships, or convince her every disagreement is grounds to leave, that mindset can eventually seep into your relationship too. Pay attention to how she talks about her friends. Does she admire women in stable, respectful relationships, or does she only stay close to people who constantly complain about men and blame every failed relationship on someone else? The company someone keeps often reveals the environment they feel most at home in. Healthy friendships encourage growth, accountability, and sound decisions. They don't not smealination. But don't push someone toward manufactured drama or convince them commitment is something to fear. That doesn't mean you get to dictate who she spends time with. Trying to control someone's friendships rarely ends well. Instead, observe the patterns. Notice whether the people closest to her encourage honesty and maturity, or whether they constantly steer her toward conflict and negativity. A relationship grows far stronger when both partners are surrounded by people who genuinely support healthy love instead of planting seeds of doubt and resentment. The seventh red flag is one many men overlook, assuming the past no longer matters. It's when a woman carries a long history of broken relationships, yet every single one ended for the exact same reason. According to her, every ex was toxic, controlling, immature, or simply failed her somehow, while she accepts little to no responsibility for how those relationships actually ended. Speaking as a woman, let me say something many people find hard to admit. No one is perfect. We've all made mistakes in relationships, said things we regret, handled situations poorly, or stayed far longer than we should have. Emotional maturity isn't about having a flawless past. It's about being honest enough to acknowledge where you could have done better. That's why accountability matters so deeply. When someone can never own their mistakes, growth becomes nearly impossible. If every failed relationship is always someone else's fault, chances are the same pattern will simply repeat in the next one. Pay attention to how she discusses her past. Does she speak with honesty and genuine self-reflection? Or does every story cast her as the victim while everyone else plays the villain? That answer reveals far more than the number of relationships she's had. The healthiest partners don't pretend they've never erred. They learn from their mistakes, take responsibility where it's deserved, and use those lessons to build something healthier going forward. A woman capable of reflecting on her past with humility is usually far more prepared for a lasting relationship than someone convinced everyone else has always been the problem. The eighth and final red flag is something few people think to examine, yet it can expose patterns that existed long before you ever entered the picture. The kind of family environment she comes from, particularly if there's a long history of unhealthy relationships, constant conflict, or generations of broken partnerships that were never addressed. To be clear, a woman should never be judged simply for the family she was born into. None of us choose our upbringing, and plenty of people from difficult homes go on to build loving, stable relationships. The real question is whether she's rashing and made a deliberate effort to break them. Speaking as a woman, this is one of the most important conversations any couple can have. Ask how she views the relationships she grew up witnessing. What did she take away from them? What would she do differently? Does she take ownership of building a healthier future? Or does she believe the same cycle is simply unavoidable? Our childhoods shape us more than we often recognize. The way we communicate, handle conflict, express love, and respond to disappointment is deeply influenced by what we repeatedly witnessed growing up. That's why awareness matters far more than perfection. A woman who recognizes unhealthy family patterns and has consciously worked to overcome them is usually far better prepared for a healthy relationship than someone who refuses to multiply. Unnoticed, when choosing someone to build a future with, don't just examine who they are today. Pay attention to the habits they steer and the ones they fought hard to leave behind. Here's the truth that deserves to sink in deep. The difference between a lifetime of peace and a lifetime of regret often comes down to what you were willing to see and what you chose to ignore. Every red flag you've heard today wasn't a dent. It was placed there as a mirror. It was placed there as a mirror, forcing you to ask whether you make the future on solid ground or quietly standing on cracked foundation, hoping love alone will hold it together. It won't. Love was never meant to be a rescue mission, and you were never meant to shrink, sacrifice, or silence your own instincts just to keep someone who was never truly choosing you back. The man who wins in the end is the one who ignored the warning signs because he was afraid of being alone. He's the one who respected himself enough to walk away from anything that demanded he abandon his standards. He's the one who understood that patience isn't weakness, that observation isn't cruelty, and that choosing wisely isn't the opposite of loving deeply. It's what makes deep love possible in the first place. So don't rush toward comfort. Don't mistake chemistry for compatibility. Don't confuse loyalty with loyalty to someone who's never proven she deserves it. The relationship you actually want, the one built on mutual respect, shared growth, and real partnership, is waiting for the version of you who refuses to settle for anything less. Every red flag you walk away from today is a doorway you were leaving open for something far greater tomorrow. Stand firm, stay wise, choose with your eyes open, not just your heart, because the life you build depends entirely on what yours what. And you were always meant for more than settling.